Officer Luke's patrol car crept slowly through the quiet streets of the suburban neighborhood, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the neatly trimmed lawns and orderly houses. His eyes scanned the area alert, but everything seemed peaceful. As he passed the local playground, a small figure caught his attention, a young girl swinging alone. Her dark hair shimmered in the fading sunlight as she pushed her legs back and forth. Just another afternoon, Luke muttered to himself, his voice sounding rough even to his own ears. He had been on the force for years, and the job had become as routine as brushing his teeth. As Luke continued his patrol, his mind drifted to his empty apartment. No one waited for him there. No family photos adorned the walls, no clutter to clean up, just silence. He sighed, a familiar ache rising in his chest. Luke had always prioritized his work, thinking there would be time for a family later, but later never seemed to arrive. Shaking his head, he pushed the lonely thoughts aside and focused on the road ahead. Luke's patrol car disappeared around a corner, leaving Leah alone in the growing shadows of the playground. As the afternoon waned, a cold breeze swept through the neighborhood. Luke's car circled back to the playground area once more, and this time, something felt different. He slowed down, his eyes narrowing on a small figure huddled on the ground. He blinked, unsure if he was seeing correctly, but there she was, the same little girl from earlier, now asleep on the ground. Luke's heart skipped a beat. Something wasn't right. He stopped the car, stepping out with a crunch of gravel beneath his boots as he approached her cautiously. "Hey there," he called softly, gently shaking the girl's shoulder. "Wake up, sweetheart." Leah's eyes fluttered open, confusion and fear flashing across her face as she looked up at the officer. "It's okay," Luke reassured her, his voice unusually gentle. "I'm Officer Luke. What are you doing out here so late? It's getting cold." Leah sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes. In the dim light of a nearby street lamp, she seemed so small, so vulnerable. "I'm waiting for my mom," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Luke's brow furrowed. "Waiting? Where is she?" Leah's lower lip trembled. "She went to find work. She said she'd come back, but..." Tears welled up in her eyes, and Luke felt a lump rise in his throat. Kneeling down to meet her gaze, he asked softly, "How long has she been gone?" 5 days, Leah admitted, her voice breaking. Luke's heart sank. He struggled to keep his expression calm, not wanting to scare her. "And where's your home, sweetheart?" Leah glanced down at her hands. "We don't have one anymore. Mom said the playground was safe until she came back." The revelation hit Luke like a punch in the gut. This little girl had been alone and homeless for days. He took a deep breath, trying to process the weight of it all while maintaining his composure. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Leah," she replied, her voice quiet and frightened. Luke nodded, his mind racing. He knew he had to help her, but the path ahead felt uncertain. "Leah, it's not safe for you to stay here. We need to find a warm place for you to sleep tonight." Leah's eyes filled with fresh tears as she spoke, her voice trembling. "Mom told me to stay here. She promised she'd come back." Hugging herself tightly against the cold, she looked up at Luke with a mixture of fear and hope. His heart broke for her, but years of maintaining a professional distance kept him from reaching out to comfort her. Instead, he cleared his throat and asked, "Have you been here the whole time? Where have you been sleeping?" Leah pointed to a nearby slide. "Under there when it rains. On the bench when it's dry." She looked at him with wide eyes, searching for reassurance. "Do you think my mom will find me if I leave?" Luke struggled to find the right words, his usual stoic demeanor faltering as emotions warred within him. "I'm sure your mom wants you to be safe, Leah. And right now, it's not safe for you to stay here alone." He stood up, his mind racing through procedures and protocols. "I'm going to help you, okay? We need to get you somewhere warm and safe for tonight." Leah hesitated, glancing around the playground that had been her home for days. "But what if?" "I promise we'll look for your mom," Luke interrupted, his voice softer than usual. "But first, we need to take care of you." With gentle persuasion, Luke managed to get Leah into his patrol car. As they drove toward the station, he kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror. She seemed so small, so lost sitting in the back seat. At the station, Luke brought Leah to his desk, wrapping a blanket from the emergency supplies around her small shoulders. "Wait here, okay? I'm going to make a few calls." As he turned to walk away, Luke couldn't shake the image of Leah huddled beneath that slide, waiting for a mother who might never return. The weight of her story pressed heavily on him, and for the first time in years he felt the full gravity of his responsibility, not just as a police officer, but as a person who had the power to make a difference in someone's life. As Officer Luke dialed the number for social services, His eyes remained fixed on Leah. She sat quietly, her gaze wandering around the unfamiliar room. He felt an unexpected tug in his chest, a protective instinct he had never experienced before. As Leah sat, wrapped in the blanket he'd given her, Luke handed her a steaming cup of hot chocolate and a sandwich from the break room. She accepted them gratefully, her small hands trembling slightly as she sipped the warm drink. Luke watched her, his brow furrowed in worry. The girl's story weighed heavily on his mind, stirring emotions he usually kept locked away. He clutched the phone tightly as he waited for social services to answer, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Leah. She looked so fragile, yet there was a quiet strength about her that stirred something deep within him. Right then Luke made a decision. He wouldn't simply pass off her case to someone else. He would personally investigate the disappearance of her mother. "Hello, this is Officer Luke from the 5th Precinct," he said when someone finally picked up. As he explained Leah's situation, he jotted down notes, formulating ideas for his own investigation. After hanging up, Luke knelt down beside Leah's chair. "I've arranged for you to stay somewhere safe tonight," he told her gently, "but I want you to know something important." Leah's wide, questioning eyes met his. "I promise you," Luke said softly but firmly, "I'll do everything I can to find your mother and bring her back to you." For the first time since he found her, Leah's face lit up with a glimmer of hope. Luke felt a lump form in his throat, realizing how much this little girl had come to mean to him in such a short time. As he stood up, he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were procedures to follow, leads to chase, and countless unknowns. But seeing Leah's trusting face, he silently renewed his vow. No matter how difficult the search became, he would reunite this child with her mother. Luke sat at his desk, surrounded by piles of paperwork and a notepad filled with scribbled leads. He had been working tirelessly on Leah's case, his determination growing stronger each day. The phone felt like it was glued to his ear as he made call after call, his voice hoarse from hours of conversations. "Yes, I'm asking about a woman who might have come in search of work," he said to the manager of a local restaurant. It was the 5th call he'd made that morning, and each time the answer was the same. No one matching Nicole's description had been there. Luke rubbed his tired eyes, feeling the weight of disappointment settle on him, but he refused to give up. Leah's hopeful face kept flashing in his mind, pushing him forward. He contacted hospitals in neighboring cities, checked shelters, and even reached out to old police academy friends now scattered across the state. Every dead end felt like a personal failure. As the days turned into weeks, Luke found himself thinking about Leah more and more. He visited her regularly at the foster home where she was staying, bringing small treats and updates on his progress. Her quiet strength and unwavering faith that her mother would return touched him deeply. One night, while sitting in his patrol car, Luke caught sight of a mother and daughter walking hand in hand down the street. A knot formed in his throat, and he was startled to feel tears prickling at the corners of his eyes. "What's happening to me?" he whispered to himself, wiping his eyes roughly with the back of his hand. Luke had always prided himself on his emotional control, but Leah's situation was breaking down the walls he had so carefully built. He pulled out the photo of Nicole that Leah had given him, studying the smiling face of the woman who had left her daughter behind. Luke felt a mix of anger and sympathy for Nicole. What could have driven her to such desperate measures? Yet, at the same time, something about her features seemed oddly familiar to him, leaving him with even more questions. As Luke stared at the photo, he made a quiet vow. He would find Nicole, not only for Leah's sake but for his own peace of mind. This case had become more than just another investigation. It had turned into a personal mission that was changing him in ways he never anticipated. The next day, Officer Luke paid Leah a visit. He sat across from her in the small room, the harsh lights casting a bright glow. "Are you comfortable, Leah?" Luke asked, his voice softer than usual. Leah nodded, her tiny hands wrapped around a warm mug. "Yes, thank you, Officer Luke." Luke leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Can you tell me more about your mom? What do you remember about her?" At the mention of her mother, Leah's eyes brightened. "She's the best mom ever. She always sings to me before bed and makes silly faces when I'm feeling sad." As Leah spoke, Luke felt a tightness in his chest. He listened carefully, watching the blend of joy and sorrow spread across her young face. "She works really hard," Leah continued. "Sometimes she would come home so tired, but she'd still read me a story." Luke nodded, encouraging her to go on. "What's your favorite memory with her?" Leah's smile widened. "Last summer we had a picnic at the park. Mom packed sandwiches and we fed the ducks. It was the best day ever." Suddenly her smile faded. "I miss her so much, Officer Luke. I'm scared I'll never see her again." Luke's heart ached for the little girl. He wanted to reach out and comfort her but hesitated, unsure how to bridge the emotional gap he had kept closed for so long. Instead, he leaned in closer, his voice low and serious. "Leah, I want you to listen to me carefully. I promise I won't stop looking for your mother no matter how long it takes. I'll do everything I can to find her and bring her back to you." Leah's eyes filled with tears. "Really? You promise?" Luke nodded, surprised by the intensity of his own emotions. "I promise. We'll find her together." Luke's heart raced as he drove toward the hospital. The lead felt promising and he couldn't help but hope that this would be the break they needed. As he parked his patrol car, he took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. Walking through the hospital doors, Luke approached the front desk. "Excuse me," he said, flashing his badge. "I'm Officer Luke. I'm looking for information about a patient who was brought in a few weeks ago after a car accident." The nurse behind the desk glanced up at him. "Of course, officer. Can you tell me more about the patient?" Luke described the woman based on what Leah had told him. The nurse quickly typed into her computer, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We did have a patient who matches that description," she said after a moment. "She was in critical condition when she arrived. Let me check her current status." Luke's heart pounded in his chest as he waited, thinking of Leah's hopeful face. He silently prayed that this would be her mother. "She's still here," the nurse finally said, glancing up from the screen. "Room 342. But officer, I should warn you, she's been in a coma since the accident." Luke felt the air leave his lungs. Luke nodded, his throat tight. "Thank you," he managed to say as he headed toward the third floor. His mind raced. What if it really was Leah's mother? How would he tell the little girl that her mother was in a coma? And if it wasn't her, how would he break that news? Outside room 342, Luke paused, taking another deep breath, bracing himself for whatever he might find inside. With a steady hand, he pushed the door open. The room was quiet, save for the soft beeping of the machines. Luke's eyes fell on the woman lying in the bed. Her face was bruised and swollen, but even through the injuries he could see a resemblance to Leah. He moved closer, studying her features. The shape of her nose, the curve of her cheeks, they were so much like the little girl waiting at the station. His heart raced, a mix of hope and dread swirling within him. Standing by the hospital bed, Luke's chest tightened as he looked at the woman's face. Despite the bruises and swelling, there was something achingly familiar about her. He turned to the nurse, who had followed him into the room. "Can I see her chart?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The nurse nodded and handed him a clipboard. Luke's eyes scanned the information, and suddenly the world seemed to tilt beneath his feet. There, in black and white, was a name he hadn't seen in years. Nicole Thompson. "Nicole?" he breathed, his hands trembling as he clutched the clipboard. Memories came rushing back. High school dances, stolen kisses under the bleachers, promises of forever. Nicole had been his first love, his high school sweetheart, and now here she was, lying unconscious in a hospital bed. Luke sank into the chair beside the bed, overwhelmed by a flood of emotions. He gazed at Nicole's face again, seeing beyond the injuries to the girl he once knew. How had life brought them to this moment? And then, suddenly, it all made sense. Leah's eyes, so familiar and haunting, were Nicole's eyes. The little girl waiting, scared and alone, at the station was the daughter of the woman he had once loved so deeply. "Oh, Nicole," Luke whispered softly, taking her hand in his. "What happened to you?" Sensing Luke's anguish, the nurse placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "She's been here for weeks," she explained gently. "We've been trying to locate her family, but—" Luke nodded, understanding the unspoken words. Nicole had been here, unconscious and alone, unable to reach her daughter. His heart ached for both of them, for Nicole, fighting for her life, and for little Leah, waiting so faithfully for her mother's return. In that moment, Luke felt the full weight of the promise he had made to Leah. This wasn't just about reuniting a mother and daughter anymore. It was about reconnecting with his own past, about healing old wounds and forging a new path forward. His mind raced. What would he say to Nicole when she woke up? How could he explain to her that their daughter was safe but alone and scared? The enormity of the responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. As he gazed at Nicole, she seemed so small and fragile in the hospital bed, surrounded by the soft hum of machines. He moved closer, pulling a chair to sit beside her. "Nicole," he whispered, gently taking her hand in his. "I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm here. I found Leah and she's safe. I promise I'll take care of her until you get better." His voice faltered, thick with emotion. Luke squeezed her hand gently, hoping for any sign that she could hear him, but the steady beep of the heart monitor was his only response. A nurse entered the room, snapping Luke out of his thoughts. "Excuse me," he said, clearing his throat. "I'm Officer Luke Peterson. I knew Nicole years ago. Can you tell me about her condition? When might she wake up?" The nurse's eyes softened with sympathy. "She's been in a coma since the accident," she explained. "We're hopeful she'll wake soon, but there's no way to know for sure. The doctors are doing everything they can." Luke nodded, his heart heavy as he looked at Nicole again, determination settling in his chest. "I'll be back," he promised her softly. "And I'll bring Leah. We'll get through this. Together." As Luke left Nicole's hospital room, his heart weighed down with emotions, his mind swirled with thoughts. Each step toward the parking lot felt heavier than the last. When he finally reached his car, the weight of everything crashed down on him. He collapsed into the driver's seat, not even bothering to start the engine. Tears welled in his eyes as he stared blankly at the steering wheel. How had he let this happen? If only he had stayed in touch with Nicole, maybe things would have been different. "I'm so sorry, Nicole," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I should have been there for you." The shock of discovering Nicole's identity left him dizzy and overwhelmed. Memories of their high school days flooded his mind. The laughter, the dreams they had shared, the promises they made. "How did we let this happen?" he muttered to himself, his voice thick with emotion. Guilt consumed him as he remembered how they drifted apart after graduation. Life had pulled them in different directions, and neither of them had fought hard enough to stay connected. Now, years later, fate had brought them back together in the most unexpected and heartbreaking way. Luke took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He knew what he had to do. With renewed resolve, he started the car and drove back to the hospital. He couldn't change the past, but he could make a difference now. The guilt that weighed on him was now mixed with a new sense of purpose. This wasn't just about helping a random child anymore. This was personal. Leah wasn't just any little girl. She was Nicole's daughter. And Nicole was someone he had cared for deeply. Taking a deep breath to calm his nerves, Luke realized that his commitment had grown far beyond his initial promise to help Leah. Now he felt an overwhelming need to set things right, not just for the little girl but for Nicole too. "I won't let you down again," he vowed quietly, as if Nicole could somehow hear him. "I'll take care of Leah and I'll be here for you when you wake up. We'll figure this out. Together." As he sat there, Luke's mind raced with ideas on how to help Nicole and Leah. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to do whatever it took. He had to find a way to care for Leah while Nicole recovered, to make sure she was safe and loved. This wasn't just about keeping a promise anymore, it was about healing two broken lives and maybe, just maybe, mending his own in the process. The enormity of the situation struck Luke again. He was no longer just Officer Luke fulfilling his duty. He was Luke, the man with a chance to make things right, to be there for two people who desperately needed him. As he returned to the police station, the weight of his discovery hung heavily on his heart. Walking through the familiar halls, his mind was consumed with thoughts of Nicole and Leah. He took a deep breath, steadying himself before entering the room where Leah was temporarily staying with social services. When he entered, Leah's eyes lit up. She sat on a small sofa, clutching a stuffed animal tightly against her chest. Luke's stern expression softened at the sight of her. "Hey Leah," he said gently, sitting beside her. "How are you doing?" Leah looked up at him with hopeful eyes. "Did you find my mom?" she asked quietly, her voice filled with expectation. Luke's heart clenched. He wanted so badly to tell her everything, but he knew it wasn't the right time. He needed more information. He had to be sure about Nicole's condition before giving Leah any news that might upset her. "We're getting closer," he said, trying to sound reassuring. "I promise we're doing everything we can to find her." Leah's face fell slightly, but she nodded bravely. "Okay," she whispered. A lump formed in Luke's throat. He awkwardly reached out, patting her hand and used to showing affection. "Hey," he said softly, "I know it's hard to wait, but you're being so brave. Your mom would be really proud of you." Tears welled up in Leah's eyes. "I miss her so much," she admitted, her voice cracking. Luke's own eyes burned with unshed tears. He cleared his throat, trying to maintain his composure. "I know you do, sweetheart, but I promise we're not giving up. We'll find her and bring her back to you." Leah looked at him with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Really?" she asked, her voice trembling. Luke nodded firmly. "Really?" he said. "You have my word." In the following days, Luke found himself spending more and more time at the hospital. He spoke with Nicole's doctors, his face a mask of concern as they explained her condition. The news was mixed. While Nicole was recovering, it would take time before she regained consciousness and could reunite with Leah. "How long?" Luke asked, his voice tight with worry. The doctor shook his head. It's hard to say. Could be days, it could be weeks. We're doing everything we can, but head injuries are complicated. Luke nodded, his jaw clenched. He thanked the doctor and stepped into the hallway, leaning against the wall for support. The weight of the situation pressed down on him, testing his patience. But as he thought of Leah's hopeful face, his resolve only grew stronger. He knew he had to be there for the little girl during this difficult time. It wasn't just about finding her mother anymore, it was about supporting her through the long wait ahead. Every day Luke visited Nicole's room, talking to her unconscious form, updating her on Leah's well-being. Then he would return to the social center, where Leah anxiously awaited any news. "We're still waiting," he would tell her gently, watching her face fall each time. "But your mom is getting better. We just need to be patient." As the days passed, Luke found himself opening up more to Leah. He brought her small treats, a chocolate bar, a coloring book, anything to bring a smile to her face. He listened as she told stories about her mother, her eyes lighting up with each memory. "Your mom sounds like a really special person," Luke said one afternoon, his voice soft. Leah nodded, hugging her knees to her chest. "She is. Do you think she misses me too?" Luke felt his heart tighten. He reached out hesitantly, placing a comforting hand on Leah's shoulder. "I know she does, sweetheart. I bet she can't wait to see you again." As he watched Leah's brave smile, Luke silently renewed his vow to reunite this family. No matter how long it took, he would be there, supporting them every step of the way. As the days turned into weeks, Leah and Luke began to form a special bond. The once cautious and guarded little girl started to open up to the stern police officer. One afternoon, while they were sitting together in the social center's playroom, Leah looked up at Luke with her big brown eyes. "Officer Luke," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Luke turned to her, his usual stern expression softening. "Yes, Leah? I'm scared," she admitted, clutching her teddy bear tightly. What if Mom doesn't come back?" Luke's heart ached at her words. He took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "Leah, I promise you we're doing everything we can to find your mom. And I know she wants to come back to you more than anything in the world." Leah nodded, but tears filled her eyes. "I miss her so much. Sometimes I worry she's gone because of me." Luke couldn't hold back anymore. He reached out and gently patted Leah's hand. "No, sweetheart, that's not true. Your mom loves you so much. I'm sure of that." As Leah wiped away her tears, Luke felt something shift inside him. The wall he had built around his heart began to crumble. He found himself sharing stories about his own childhood, about times when he had felt scared or alone. "You know," he said, a small smile playing on his lips, "when I was your age, I used to be afraid of the dark. Can you believe that?" Leah laughed, her eyes widening in surprise. "You? But you're so brave." Luke chuckled, shaking his head. "Everybody gets scared sometimes, Leah. It's okay to feel that way. What's important is that we don't let our fears stop us from hoping and believing in good things." As the days passed, Luke found himself looking forward to his visits with Leah. Her smile, her laughter, even her tears, they all awakened a sense of compassion in him that he thought he had lost long ago. He realized that while he was trying to help this little girl, she was helping him too, reminding him of the importance of human connection and empathy. One day, Luke was sitting at his desk, going through the files he had gathered about Nicole's life before the accident. His brow furrowed as he read through employment records, rental agreements, and social services reports. The more he learned, the heavier his heart felt. Nicole had been working 3 part-time jobs, juggling shifts at a diner, a convenience store, and a cleaning service. Her paychecks showed meager earnings, barely enough to cover rent and food. Luke's throat tightened as he imagined Nicole's struggle to survive. Among the papers he found eviction notices and overdue bills. It was clear Nicole had been fighting a losing battle just to provide for Leah. Closing his eyes, Luke was overwhelmed by the weight of this knowledge. "How could I have let this happen?" he murmured to himself, his voice filled with emotion. Luke thought back to his high school days with Nicole. They had been so young, so full of hope and dreams. He wondered how things might have been different if they had kept in touch. If he could have helped her, if he could have been there for Leah. The guilt gnawed at him, fueling a fierce determination to make things right. He knew he couldn't change the past, but he could certainly shape the future. Luke made a silent vow to do whatever it took to reunite Nicole and Leah, and to ensure that they never faced such hardships again. With renewed energy, Luke plunged back into his research. He contacted Nicole's former employers, seeking any information that could help him better understand her situation. Every conversation, every new detail strengthened his resolve. As Luke worked, his thoughts kept drifting to Leah's bright smile and Nicole's kind eyes. He realized that his desire to help them went far beyond a sense of duty or guilt. Somewhere along the way, these two had become important to him in a way he couldn't quite put into words. Luke found himself visiting Leah more often at the social services center, and each time he brought her a small gift, a chocolate bar or a colorful hair clip. Today he arrived with a plush puppy tucked under his arm. When he walked into the room, Leah's face lit up. "Officer Luke," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with joy. Luke felt a warmth spread through his chest. He handed her the stuffed animal and she hugged it tightly. "How are you today, Leah?" he asked gently. Leah's smile faltered a little. "I'm okay," she replied softly, "but I really miss my mom." "Have you found her yet?" Luke took a deep breath. He knew this moment would come, but that didn't make it any easier. He sat down next to Leah, his heart heavy with the news he had to share. "Leah," he began, his voice soft but steady, "I have some news about your mom." The little girl's eyes widened, a mix of hope and fear flashing across her face. "Did you find her? Is she coming to get me?" Luke nodded slowly. "I found her, but there's something you need to know. Your mom had an accident recently. That's why she couldn't come back to pick you up at the playground." Leah's bottom lip trembled and tears welled up in her eyes. "Is she okay?" she whispered, clutching the stuffed puppy even tighter. Luke reached out and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "She's getting better," he reassured her. "The doctors are taking very good care of her and she's healing. It might take a little time, but she's going to be okay." Leah's tears spilled over, streaming down her cheeks. Luke's own eyes stung as he watched her absorb the news. He wished he could shield her from this pain, but he knew that being honest was what mattered most. "I promise you, Leah," Luke said, his voice filled with determination, "your mom is going to be okay and soon you'll be together again. I'll make sure of it." Leah looked up at him, her eyes glistening with tears but also holding a glimmer of hope. "Really?" she asked, her voice quiet but filled with cautious belief. Luke nodded firmly. "Really? You have my word." Leah's small shoulders shook as she sobbed, her tears soaking the fur of the plush puppy she held close. Luke's heart shattered at the sight of her grief. "And what if mom doesn't get better?" Leah choked out between sobs. Luke swallowed hard, fighting back his own emotions. He had always been the tough cop, never showing vulnerability, but now, looking into the tear-streaked face of this little girl, he felt his walls crumble. "Leah," he said softly, moving closer to her, "I know you're scared. It's okay to be scared." He hesitated for a moment, then gently wrapped his arm around her shoulders. To his surprise, Leah leaned into him, seeking comfort. "I'm scared too," Luke admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. It was the first time he had spoken those words out loud in years. "But I want you to know something very important. No matter what happens, I'll be here for you. You won't have to go through this alone." Leah's sobs quieted as she rested against him, finding solace in the safety of his promise. And in that moment, Luke realized that, just as much as Leah needed him, he needed her too. Leah gazed up at him with wide eyes, shimmering with tears. "You promise?" she asked, her voice small and vulnerable. Luke felt a lump form in his throat. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When he finally found his voice, it was choked with emotion. "I promise, Leah, with all my heart." For the first time in his career, Luke let his hardened exterior completely fall away. He pulled Leah into a gentle embrace, feeling her tiny arms wrap around him in return. As he held her, his own eyes filled with tears. "It's going to be okay," he murmured, both to himself and to Leah. "We'll get through this together." As the days passed, Luke found himself spending more and more time at the hospital. He would sit by Nicole's bedside, speaking to her softly, hoping his words would somehow reach her. One morning, as he entered her room, he noticed a change. Nicole's face looked more relaxed, her breathing steadier. Dr. Chin, Nicole's attending physician, approached Luke with a smile. "Officer Luke, I have good news," she said, her eyes bright with hope. "Nicole's condition has improved significantly. We expect her to regain consciousness soon." Luke's heart skipped a beat. "Really?" he asked, his voice brimming with hope and disbelief. Dr. Chin nodded. "Her vital signs are strong and her brain activity is increasing. It could be any moment now." Unable to contain his joy, Luke thanked Dr. Chin and then dashed to call Leah's social worker. As he dialed the number, his hands trembled with excitement. "Leah's mother is getting better," he told the social worker. "We need to prepare for their reunion." As he worked, Luke's mind raced with thoughts of the upcoming reunion. He pictured Leah's face lighting up when she saw her mother awake, Imagine Nicole's tears of joy as she embraced her daughter. The thought filled him with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Yet, along with the excitement came a twinge of fear. What if things didn't go as planned? What if Nicole wasn't ready? He pushed those fears aside, focusing instead on the positive. They need this, he told himself. They both need this so much. The day finally arrived when Nicole began to stir. Luke was sitting beside her bed, his hand resting gently on hers, when he noticed her eyelids flutter. His heart raced as he watched her slowly regain consciousness. "Nicole," he whispered, his voice a blend of hope and concern. Nicole's eyes opened slowly, blinking against the harsh hospital lights. She looked around in confusion until her gaze settled on Luke. A flicker of recognition crossed her face. "Luke," she croaked, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Is it really you?" Luke nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "Yes, Nicole, it's me. You're in the hospital. You had an accident, but you're going to be okay." Nicole's brow furrowed as she tried to process the information. Suddenly, her eyes widened in panic. "Leah," she gasped. "Where is my daughter?" Luke gently squeezed her hand. "Leah is safe," he assured her. "I found her at the playground where you left her. She's been in the care of social services while you've been recovering." Tears streamed down Nicole's face as relief washed over her. "Oh, thank God," she whispered. "I was so worried. I never meant to leave her for so long. I needed to find work, and then the accident happened." Luke nodded understandingly. "I know, Nicole. I've learned about everything you've been through. You've been so strong trying to provide for Leah on your own." Nicole looked at Luke with gratitude and confusion in her eyes. "But how did you find her? How did you know?" Luke explained how he had found Leah at the playground and had been searching for Nicole. He told her about the investigation that led him to uncover her identity and her connection to Leah. As Luke finished his explanation, Nicole's eyes filled with fresh tears. "I can't believe you did all of this for us," she said softly. "Thank you, Luke. Thank you so much." Luke smiled warmly. "Leah is an incredible little girl, Nicole. She's been so brave through all of this. I promise I'll bring her to see you as soon as the doctors say you're well enough." Nicole nodded, squeezing Luke's hand. "I can't wait to see her," she whispered, her voice full of longing and love. As Luke left the hospital, a swirl of emotions churned in his chest. He felt relieved that Nicole was awake but anxious about sharing the news with Leah. As Luke drove to the social services center where Leah was staying, he rehearsed what he would say when he arrived. He found Leah sitting quietly in a corner, drawing pictures. Her eyes lit up with cautious hope, a look Luke had come to recognize over the past few weeks as he approached her. "Leah," Luke said softly, kneeling beside her. "I have some good news for you." Leah's eyes widened and she set down her crayon. "Is it about my mom?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Luke nodded, a gentle smile spreading across his face. "Yes, your mom is awake and she's improving. She's asking to see you." Tears welled up in Leah's eyes and for a moment she was completely still. Then, without warning, she threw her arms around Luke's neck, burying her face in his shoulder. Surprised by the sudden outpouring of affection, Luke hesitated briefly before wrapping his arms around her small frame. "She's really okay?" Leah sobbed, her voice muffled against Luke's uniform. "She's really okay," Luke assured her, his own eyes misting over. "And we're going to see her very soon." As Leah cried tears of relief and joy, Luke felt something shift inside him. The walls he had built around his heart over the years began to crumble. He realized how much this little girl and her mother had come to mean to him. When Leah finally pulled away, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, Luke saw a glimmer in her eyes that he hadn't noticed before. It was as though all the hope she had been holding on to suddenly burst into life. "When can we go?" Leah asked eagerly. "Can we go now?" Luke chuckled softly. "Not just yet. The doctors want to make sure your mom is strong enough for visitors. But I promise as soon as they give the okay, I'll take you to see her." Leah nodded seriously. "Okay, I can wait a little longer. I've waited this long, right?" Luke felt a surge of pride at her bravery. "That's right. You've been so strong, Leah. Your mom will be so proud of you." As they prepared for the upcoming reunion, Luke found himself reflecting on how profoundly this experience had changed him. The tough, no-nonsense officer he had been just a few weeks ago seemed like a distant memory. In his place was a man who had rediscovered his capacity for compassion and love. The day of the reunion finally arrived, bright and full of promise. Luke woke up early, his heart pounding with anxiety. He meticulously donned his uniform, wanting to be at his best for this special day. As he drove to pick up Leah, he couldn't shake the blend of excitement and nervousness that bubbled inside him. When Luke arrived at the social services center, Leah was already waiting, dressed in her finest clothes. Her hair was neatly combed, and she held a small bouquet of flowers she had picked from the center's garden. As soon as she saw Luke, her face lit up with a smile that warmed his heart. "Are you ready?" Luke asked gently, kneeling to her level. Leah nodded, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of hope and anxiety. "I think so," she whispered. Luke took her tiny hand in his, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "It's okay to be nervous. Your mom is probably feeling the same way." The drive to the hospital felt like an eternity. Leah sat quietly in the back seat, her fingers fidgeting with the flower stems. Luke kept glancing at her through the rearview mirror, his own emotions swirling within him. As they pulled into the hospital parking lot, Luke could feel the tension building. He helped Leah out of the car, and together they walked toward the entrance. With each step, Leah's grip on his hand grew tighter. They took the elevator in silence, the anticipation building with each passing floor. When they finally arrived on Nicole's floor, Luke felt Leah hesitate. "It's okay," he said softly, looking at her. "Remember, your mom has been waiting for this moment too." Leah nodded bravely, taking a deep breath. They walked down the long corridor, their footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. Witnessing so many people come together to aid two strangers in need was truly moving. Later that week, Luke visited Nicole in the hospital to update her on the community's efforts. As he shared the news, tears welled up in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank everyone," she murmured, her voice choked with gratitude. Luke gently squeezed her hand. "You don't need to. They're happy to help." In the days that followed, Luke worked tirelessly to prepare everything. He cleaned Nicole's new apartment, provided by the social center, stocked the fridge, and even bought a few small toys for Leah. He wanted everything to be perfect for when they could finally move in. Luke realized something had shifted within him. The cynicism that had built up over years of police work was melting away. He felt a renewed sense of purpose and a deep connection to the community he served. As Nicole's discharge day approached, Luke was a bundle of nerves and excitement. He had grown close to Nicole and Leah during this challenging time, and he wanted their welcome home to be flawless. When the day finally arrived, he escorted them to their new apartment. As they stepped through the door, Nicole gasped in surprise at the warm and inviting space. "Oh, Luke," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "This is more than I could have ever imagined." Leah darted from room to room, her face glowing with joy. "Mommy, look. I have my own room," she exclaimed. A few days later, once they had settled in, Nicole and Leah invited Luke for a small celebration. When he arrived, the apartment was filled with the comforting aroma of home-cooked food and the soft strains of music in the background. "We wanted to thank you for everything you've done for us," Nicole said, embracing Luke warmly as he entered. They enjoyed a simple but delicious meal together, laughing and sharing stories. Luke felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in years. As they finished dessert, Leah suddenly jumped from her chair. "I have something for you, Officer Luke," she said excitedly, running to her room. When she returned, she held out a piece of paper with a shy smile. "I made this for you," she said softly. Luke took the paper and his breath caught in his throat. It was a crayon drawing of three people holding hands, Leah, Nicole, and him. Above them, in wobbly childlike letters, were the words, "My family." Luke stared at the drawing, his eyes misty. The simple but profound gesture deeply moved him. In that moment, he realized he had gained far more than he had ever expected by helping this little girl and her mother. In the weeks that followed, Luke spent more and more time with Nicole and Leah. He would drop by their apartment after his shifts, often bringing small treats or toys for Leah. The girl's face would light up every time she saw him, her eyes sparkling with joy. One sunny afternoon, Luke took Leah to the park. As they walked hand in hand, Leah looked up at him with a shy smile. "Officer Luke, can I ask you something?" Luke's heart warmed at her innocent expression. "Of course, sweetheart. What is it?" Leah hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Is it okay if I call you Dad, sometimes? You take care of me like a dad would." A lump formed in Luke's throat. He knelt to Leah's level, his eyes misty. "Leah, I'd be honored if you called me Dad. You're like a daughter to me." Leah threw her arms around his neck, hugging him tightly. Luke embraced her, feeling a wave of love and protectiveness he had never known before. As they continued their walk, Luke marveled at how much his life had changed. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for so many years had faded away, replaced by a sense of purpose and belonging that warmed his heart. At Nicole and Leah's apartment, Luke helped prepare dinner. The kitchen was filled with laughter and the delicious aroma of homemade spaghetti. When they sat down to eat, Nicole reached out and squeezed Luke's hand. "Thank you for everything, Luke," she said softly. "You've become such an important part of our lives." Luke smiled, feeling a surge of emotion. "You two have given me more than I could have ever imagined. I finally feel like I have a family." As they ate, Leah chatted happily about her day at school while Nicole and Luke exchanged affectionate glances. The bond between them all grew stronger with each passing day, creating a sense of family they hadn't anticipated but cherished deeply. As the holiday season approached, the air grew colder, and festive decorations began appearing throughout the neighborhood. Nicole and Leah's apartment was no exception, with twinkling lights and handmade snowflakes adorning the windows. One evening, while Luke was helping Leah with her homework at the kitchen table, Nicole approached him with a nervous smile. "Luke," she began, her voice soft, "I was wondering if you'd like to spend Christmas with us this year." Luke looked up, surprised. A warm feeling spread through his chest, but there was also a flicker of uncertainty. He had grown close to Nicole and Leah over the past months, but spending such an important holiday together seemed like a big step. "I don't know," he hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "Are you sure? I wouldn't want to intrude on your family time." Nicole reached out and gently touched his arm. "Luke, you're family now. We'd love to have you here." Leah's eyes sparkled with hope. "Please, Dad," she pleaded, using the term of endearment that made Luke's heart swell every time he heard it. "It would be the best Christmas ever if you were here." Luke looked from Leah's hopeful face to Nicole's warm smile. Feeling a wave of emotion, he realized his hesitation stemmed from his own fears about fully embracing this new role in their lives. But in that moment he understood that he had already become a part of their family, and he couldn't imagine celebrating the holiday without them. As he sat there, enveloped by the love and warmth of this small family, Luke knew there was no place he would rather be. "Everything's going to be okay," he finally said, a smile spreading across his face. "I'd love to spend Christmas with you both." Leah cheered and wrapped her arms around Luke's neck, while Nicole's eyes shimmered with tears of happiness. As Luke embraced Leah, he felt a profound sense of belonging wash over him. He was no longer just Officer Luke, the solitary policeman. He had become part of something greater, something beautiful. On Christmas Day, the cozy apartment was filled with the tantalizing aroma of roasted turkey and freshly baked pies. Luke arrived early, arms laden with gifts, and was greeted by Leah's excited squeals and Nicole's warm embrace. As they sat down to dinner, the table gleamed with candlelight reflecting off the sparkling ornaments of the nearby Christmas tree. Luke looked around, taking in the scene before him. Nicole was smiling, her eyes aglow as she passed a steaming dish of mashed potatoes. Leah, dressed in a festive red dress, was practically bouncing in her seat with excitement. The meal was filled with laughter and joy as they shared stories, pulled cookies, and savored each other's company. Luke felt a peace he hadn't known in years as he watched Nicole and Leah laugh over a silly joke while finishing their main course. Suddenly, Leah stood up, holding her glass of sparkling apple cider high. Her face was serious, but her eyes shone with love. "I want to make a toast," she announced, her voice soft but determined. Luke and Nicole exchanged surprised glances before turning their attention to Leah. "I want to thank Officer Luke," Leah began, her voice trembling slightly. "You didn't just save me when I was alone. You've become the family I never thought I'd have." Again, Luke felt a lump in his throat as Leah continued. "You're not just a police officer to me. You're my dad now," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "Thank you for loving us and for making our family whole." Overcome with emotion, Luke's eyes filled with tears, and he found himself unable to speak. He gazed at Leah, this brave little girl who had changed his life in ways he never imagined. Then he looked at Nicole, who was wiping away her own tears, nodding in agreement with her daughter's words. Luke stood silent for a moment, his heart overflowing with emotion as he looked at Leah and Nicole, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of the Christmas tree. He remembered the night he first met Leah at the playground. He recalled the stern, vigilant officer he used to be, always keeping his emotions in check. That man seemed like a stranger now, so different from the person he had become. He thought of the long night he spent searching for Nicole, the worry that had surged as he tried to piece together what had happened. He remembered the shock of discovering Nicole was his high school sweetheart and how that revelation had shattered the walls he had built around his heart. Luke reflected on the days he spent by Nicole's hospital bed, praying for her recovery, and the joy he felt when she finally opened her eyes. He recalled the tears that flowed freely when he reunited Leah with her mother and how that moment had shifted something fundamental within him. As he looked at Leah now, her eyes shining with trust, he realized how much she had taught him. This courageous little girl had shown him the power of hope, the strength of resilience, and the healing nature of unconditional love. She had awakened a part of him he thought had been dead long ago, the part that could care deeply, love freely, and open his heart to others. Nicole caught his attention and smiled gently as if reading his thoughts. Luke felt a warmth spread through his chest as he recalled their shared history and the new bond they had forged through this experience. She reminded him of the man he used to be, the one who believed in love and second chances. Luke realized that by helping Leah and Nicole, he had found himself again. The rigid, emotionless facade he had worn for so long had melted away, replaced by a man filled with compassion and love. He was no longer just Officer Luke but a friend, a protector, and now a father figure. As the evening wore on, the soft glow of the Christmas tree cast a gentle light over the trio. Leah yawned, her eyes heavy with sleep but her smile still bright. Nicole gently stroked her daughter's hair, her own eyes filled with gratitude as she looked at Luke. "Luke," Nicole said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how we could ever thank you enough for everything you've done for us." Leah nodded, her small hand reaching out to clasp Luke's. "You saved us," she said simply, her words carrying the weight of their shared journey. A lump formed in Luke's throat as he looked at the two of them, this small family that had become his own, and his heart swelled with love. He took a deep breath, trying to find the right words to express what he was feeling. "You know," he began, his voice gentle, "I thought I was the one helping you. But the truth is, you've given me more than I could have ever imagined." Nicole and Leah listened intently, their eyes fixed on Luke as he continued. "Before I met you two, I was just going through the motions of life. I had my job, but that was all. I didn't have love, I didn't have family, and I had lost my sense of purpose." Luke paused, swallowing hard. "But you two changed all that." Leah squeezed his hand, urging him to continue. "You gave me love," Luke said, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "You showed me what it means to be part of a family, and, most importantly, you gave me a renewed sense of purpose. I wake up every day now feeling that I have a reason to be here, to make a difference." Nicole wiped a tear from her cheek, deeply moved by Luke's words. Leah stood up and wrapped her arms around Luke's neck, hugging him tightly. "We love you, Luke," Leah whispered. Luke embraced her back, his heart overflowing. He looked at Nicole, who nodded in agreement, her own eyes brimming with tears. Returning to the precinct after the holidays, Luke's heart felt lighter than ever. He carried a small, framed drawing with him, one Leah had made of the three of them together. When he entered his office, he paused for a moment, looking around the space with fresh eyes. Carefully, he hung the colorful drawing on the wall opposite his desk, the bright colors standing out against the office's drab gray, much like how Leah and Nicole had brought color into his life. Luke took a step back, a small smile playing on his lips as he admired the child's artwork. "Hey Luke, welcome back," called Officer Johnson, an old colleague, poking his head into the office. He then noticed the new addition to the wall. "What's this you've got here?" Luke's smile widened. "It's a drawing Leah made for me," he explained, his voice filled with pride. Johnson stepped inside, examining the drawing. "Leah, the little girl you helped reunite with her mother? That's something special, Luke. You really made a difference in their lives." Luke nodded, a warmth spreading through his chest. "They made a difference in mine too," he admitted. As the day progressed, more of Luke's colleagues noticed the change in him. His usual stern demeanor had softened, replaced by a quiet contentment. He greeted everyone with a smile, and there was a new spark in his eyes that hadn't been there before. During his lunch break, Luke found himself gazing at the drawing once more. He thought of Leah's laughter, Nicole's grateful smile, and the sense of belonging he had felt during that Christmas dinner. For the first time in his career, Luke felt truly fulfilled. His work was no longer just about enforcing the law, it was about making a real difference in people's lives. As the weeks passed, Luke eagerly looked forward to his visits to Nicole and Leah's home every Saturday afternoon. He would stop in front of their modest house, his heart brimming with warmth and joy. On one of these visits, Luke arrived to find Leah waiting for him on the front porch. Her face lit up when she saw his car and she ran down the steps to greet him. "Officer Luke," she shouted, waving excitedly. Luke laughed as he got out of the car. "Hey kiddo," he said, giving her a gentle hug. "How are you?" Leah beamed at him. "Great. Mom's baking cookies. Come on." She tugged at his hand, pulling him into the house. The aroma of freshly baked cookies filled the air. Nicole was in the kitchen, her hair pulled back and a smear of flour on her cheek. She greeted Luke with a warm smile as he entered. "It's so good to see you," Nicole said, wiping her hands on her apron. "It's good to see you too, Nicole," Luke replied softly. As they sat around the kitchen table enjoying warm cookies and milk, Luke marveled at how natural everything felt. Leah chatted animatedly about her week at school while Nicole listened attentively, occasionally sharing a knowing smile with Luke. Later, as the sun began to set, Luke found himself on the back porch with Nicole while Leah was inside engrossed in a new book Luke had brought for her. "You know," Nicole said quietly, "I never thought I'd have this again, a family I mean." Luke nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "Neither did I," he admitted, "but here we are." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sky turn pink and orange. "Thank you, Luke," Nicole said suddenly, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for everything." Luke turned to her, his eyes gentle. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You and Leah, you've given me so much more than I could have imagined." As he drove home that night, Luke reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. The solitary policeman now had a family, not by blood but by something even stronger, love and compassion. If you enjoyed this story, leave a comment below, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. See you in the next video.